Hi everyone.
Hello.
I'm Jeremy. I've met some of you, not met many of you, or seen you in passing, but I'm glad we're all here, and I'm glad we get to share together. So tonight, the prompt that I've chosen to speak on, which was very helpful, he said, hey, would you like to share a story? It was like, sounds great. Do you have anything else to go on? He was like, oh yes, here's a giant list of prompts that you can choose from. And the one that stuck out to me after reflection was a moment where love surprised you. And I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I'm actually going to tell you about a series of moments where love surprised me because I couldn't just narrow it down to one. But it's important for you to know about me that as a child, I thought I was hopefully going to become a genius. I had my own little notebook titled Inventions Book, where I would scribble down notes. I would make drawings of my designs for hover cars and all sorts of things I was eventually going to come up with. I was very into creating contraptions. My family will regale you with stories about how I thought I was going to catch Santa Claus one year by setting up laser traps. The laser traps did not exist. They were just completely in my imagination. But I loved putting these together. Oftentimes for my birthday or for Christmas, one of my top gifts that I would request was simply rope. I'm just getting feet and feet of rope, which I think when I told that before to Christine in particular, she's like, sounds like you're becoming a serial killer. But no, it was because I just wanted to go in my backyard and make all sorts of things with rope. I would make traps that never caught any animals, I would do all that sort of thing. And so one morning, it was actually a Sunday morning, I remember specifically, I was in my church clothes, which is a big no-no, playing in the backyard, and my swing on, I had a fort set up in a pretty decent swing in the backyard that we've had for many years. The swing broke. And because I thought I was, so good at fixing things, I was like, I have so much rope, I'll fix this thing. And so I go over and I realize, okay, the part of the seat had connected to the chain had rusted out, and that chain, had broken apart. The link failed. I was like, easy. I'll just connect this thing up with some rope. We'll tie it all together. And I tied about 12 dozen knots and got it all situated. And I'm smart about it. Okay, it's not like I just tied it and was like, okay, it's ready to swing. I put some weight on it. I sat on it gingerly, and I was like, yeah, okay, seems like it's worked. I gave it a test little swing. Yeah, okay, we're in business. Now we're in business. Church clothes and everything. Here I'm going flying to the sky. And so I started going higher and higher, and I got right up to as high as you can go on this particular swing, which is probably 10 feet in the air or something like that. And right at that moment, what my fourth grade brain had not conceptualized is that if the chain had rusted at one part, probably other parts of the chain may not be good. And it was at that moment that the chain snapped at the very top of the swing, at the height of the swing as I'm going into the sky, and then all of a sudden realize, oh no. And come crashing down, land on my ankle bad, and break my ankle, tear the ligaments, do all the things. I'm yelling in the backyard, my mom runs out, and eventually go to the hospital, and you have a broken ankle. Now, the other thing to know is that I'm originally from Florida. So, yes, scary, Florida man in the flesh. I promise, not to, throw any alligators at you or anything. But this was right before summer was starting. It was like there was a week left of school. And the doctor was like, yeah, you're going to be in a cast for like 3 months. So the entirety of the Florida summer, where all it is 98 degrees and as humid as can be, and the only things to do with other people are go be in the water somewhere. You go to the beach, you go to the spring, you go do something like that. And as a fourth grader, what was the summer full of? Pool parties at other people's houses, and family vacation with my whole extended family, where I would sit by myself at the picnic table while the rest of the cousins went into the woods and played. And over the course of that summer, this sense of like isolation and loneliness just built and built and built. Until finally, it was later in the summer, and there was one of those fabled pool parties. I think it was a Sunday school party at my house. We had an above-ground pool, and everyone's coming over. There's food everywhere. People are jumping in, and I'm just, sitting in the shade with my foot up in my cast, just wishing I could be having fun with everyone else. And it was like that whole summer of disconnection just kind of like wrapped itself into that moment. And so I grabbed my crutches, hobbled inside, and went back to my room, shut the door, laid down on my bed, and I just cried. I just cried and cried. And maybe it's because I grew up in the 90s, and, what was on TV? Full House, Family Matters, all of the TGIF, right? Boy Meets World. And in my mind, what was supposed to happen is that someone was supposed to come to the door. They're supposed to give that little knock, crack it open, and say, "Hey, you okay, bud? Let's talk." But no one came. And so I just cried there, and then eventually got over it, and then got up and went back to the party. And no one ever knew that happened until I told that story randomly in a sermon, like 10 years later. My mom was like, did that really happen? I was like, yeah. Because I didn't tell anyone I didn't know at the time. But that sort of crystallizes for me. It's not that particular moment shaped who I am in such a dramatic way, but it is a window, I think, into why I started to become the way that I became as a young person. And where I really came to believe that no one cared and it didn't matter. And feelings weren't real. And so, as an adolescent, I started going through the rest of my life, and I just remember waiting for that knock. And no one knocked. And so, I became the sort of person who really believed, I'm not an emotional person. I don't have emotions like other people have emotions. I came to believe, that I really just didn't like people. I call myself now a recovering neurotic introvert. Still very much an introvert, and other people may argue about how much neurosis remains. But later on, going into college, I would walk around I was the sort of person who would walk around the college campus and have headphones in, and at the time there was no Bluetooth. Okay, I guess. And the cord would run down into my pocket. There's nothing in my pocket. There's no music player down there. I just put the headphones on so I could walk around and not have to say hi to people. Okay. And that often happened because the sidewalks at our school have these weird triangles, and so you'd end up in those dead zones where you saw someone from far enough away that you're like, do I say hi? Do I smile? And then if I say hi, it's 30 feet of us just looking at each other. So I would just pretend I didn't see them and have my headphones in and be like, "Hi, Jeremy," and I was just and that's sort of the person that I was. It had really kind of just locked down in my soul that emotions were just manipulation. And I was very proud of my value of independence, which for me meant not letting anyone else control you or sway you or manipulate you, even if it felt honest for me. one thing leads to another, and this is a story for another time, but I ended up living in China. And I had gone to Bible college with the intention to become a pastor. And along the way I was like, I can't become a pastor. I really dislike people, so I should just become a professor, and then I can just like get up and like tell people things I know, and then like walk away and not have to talk to them. That seemed like a great plan. And somewhere along the way, God was like, "Actually, you need to move across the world." And I was like, "Sounds terrible, but okay." And it was really when I was in China that I feel like God got his hands into me. You know, if I'm like dough on the table, where he really starts kneading in. And by the grace of God, I had been exposed to things like, celebration of discipline and Richard Foster and these ideas of how to draw close to God and how to find God in your life. And I began to take the idea of loving other people much more seriously. And as I was really earnestly trying to do that, I was like, how do I do good to other people? How do I actually do this? You guys ever have people in your life who, they're well-meaning maybe, but every time you're around them, you just want to like smack them in the face, just like the people who like really get under your skin for like no particular reason at all. I was kind of going through that with like people in my community. It was like every time I try to do something good, it always comes like back in my face, and I always get emotional about it, and I'm like so misunderstood. It felt like the kind of people where like, you bring them hot tea, and they're like, "Oh, what are you trying to burn my mouth?" And you're like, okay. So you bring them a cold drink, and they're like, "What are you trying to give me a chill?" And you're like, "Okay, here's a perfectly lukewarm, glass of water." And they're like, "I'm starving. Is there no food around here?" And so I was in my room, and I was praying earnestly, like, God, how do I do this? I mean, it seems like people are just making it so hard. And as I was praying about that, I feel like God really started to just show me, it was as if there was a door in my soul that had become locked. And it was as if he was saying to me, "Listen, Jeremy, you cannot just try to do good things for other people. You cannot just try to be a good person. You can't just try to make following me a project that you get right. There is something locked away inside you. There is a door that is closed, and you have to open it. If you are going to love other people, you have to be willing to be wounded." And for me, that was the picture of the cross in that moment. Of like, if Jesus is the fullest revelation of love, and the cross is the picture of his love for us, what I needed to take away was that he was willing to be wounded in order to love us. He was willing to have put down his rights. The things he was right about. Jesus was not in the wrong, and he was crucified in trying to love us. And I needed to hear that as a 20-something who struggled to have real relationships. And God helps me open up that door. And when I came back from China after living there for just 18 months or so, people were like, "Who is this person?" I became a completely different person. It's actually striking now because there's no one in my daily community now who knew me before that happened and after that happened. And I've heard from people that it's often hard for them to conceive of who I used to be. But all of a sudden, like, community became one of the highest values for me. Opening myself up to other people became one of my core convictions. Going to school, I would spend my time with my group of friends with what if we did this thing thing where, like, you know how early Christians like got together in homes and like had communion and like wasn't going to church on Sundays? Like, what if we did something like that? And it becoming like the most transformative and healing group that we had been a part of at that age. Though all those differences in me happened because God came and found me. It's difficult to describe going from someone who completely lacks empathy to someone who earnestly tried to consider and react to the emotions of other people. But I remember one of my friends, we had a very close relationship in the first year in school, and he had been through previous trauma in his life that made relationships very, very up and down for him. And because we were such close friends, it was becoming scary to him when I began to start a new relationship. And I remember us hanging out in my house, and things were all well and good. It was just the two of us, and then other people come in, and you could almost see this like withering or drawing back in him as he saw these other relationships that I had. And things concluded. We played a board game, whatever. He goes back to his apartment, and I could tell that something was wrong. We talked about this sort of thing, and so I texted him, "Hey man, are you all right? Do we need to talk?" And I didn't get a response for 20 minutes or so. And it was the sort of thing that very easily he could later say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't see your text." Right? It's the very sort of thing where it's very easy for me to be like, "Well, I sent a text. I reached out. He didn't respond." But there's something about what I have been learning from Jesus about, if someone has something against you, you leave your gift at the altar and you go and you find them and you make things right. And in that moment, that felt right. And so I left my apartment. I walked across the apartment complex because we all moved in the same place because we were in school. And I went up to the door, kind of like let myself in, find his roommate out in the main area. I'm like, "Hey, is he here?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, don't worry about it." Go back to his bedroom door, knock on the door. Say, "Hey, I think we can talk." I remember sitting down with him and him just being sort of shocked that I was there. We're talking. He's like, Where did you learn this? No one does this." And it made me stop and reflect. I don't know. I guess Jesus taught me this. And I kind of want to pause there because I know that what happened for me. I know this is. I don't want people to take away. I had to learn the lesson that I need to put down my rights. That I have to be willing to suffer for other people. But I also want to recognize this is a very gendered story for me, and that in America it's very common for guys to have to go through the process of your emotional side is squashed, and you need to learn to exist more than just having anger and being prideful. And I very much want to recognize that if you're a woman, particularly if you grew up in a Christian setting, you probably don't need to learn the lesson as much, that you need to serve other people and not think of yourself. There's probably other lessons Jesus needs to help you with. But this is my story. And I just want to pause and say, we don't have to universalize my story. But I think what it does mean for me is that God can and will transform the deepest parts of you. And that's what it means to be a follower of Christ. It's not that God just wants to help you with projects of self-improvement or simply make you more moral or better at following rules. But what I found is that Jesus invites us into the kind of transformation that's beyond what we ourselves can imagine ourselves to be. It's a deconstruction of even our most precious identities that we hold so closely, and these remaking of the most basic ways we relate to the world and other people around us. He invites us into love in all of its splendor, in all of its heartbreak. He invites us into this movement of love, this dance of love that is the life of God itself, that is the Trinity itself. Jesus extends to us his scarred palm, beckoning us to join that dance. To join the steps of giving and receiving, of knowing and being known, of loving and being loved. And before we realize it, before we're even fully aware of what has happened, we find we're extending our hand and welcoming other people to that same dance. It comes as a surprise, remembering ourselves lying on the bed, waiting for a knock at the door, without expecting it, without fully knowing it's happening. We've been transformed. And our hand goes up, perhaps with a tremble, and we become the one who knocks. Friend, can I come in? I think we can talk. And that's what Jesus does for us. Let's pray. God, we thank you that you seek us out with relentless love. And that there's no door you won't kick down to come find us and rescue us and bring us into your life, your very life that you want to give to us. Help us to see you. Help us to respond to you. And help us to love.